Okay. Go ahead. One more time. One more time.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Josh.
Hi, I'm Joe.
Whoopsie daisy.
Wrong names.
I'm Joe.
I'm Josh.
Welcome to the JOS podcast.
That stands for something, doesn't it?
You're absolutely right, Joe.
It's Josh.
Right. This is the Just Oversimplifying podcast. Not answering questions you never asked. This week's podcast is about identity, free will, and soul. Thank you for listening. Boom, podcast. What do you got?
Oh, well, I just want to talk a little bit about the ship of Theseus again, because I've been reading about it in my metaphysics book, 4th edition, by Peter Van Ingwengen. Pretty smart guy, usually.
Nice.
And I remember talking to you about it a couple days ago, but I didn't give you the full puzzle. I gave you a version of it. But this version, to me at least, seems a little bit more complicated. Follow me for a second.
Okay.
So we have the ship of Theseus, and we already talked about the planks that have been removed from the ship and the like, and eventually that ship comes back to harbor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's remove the harbor altogether. There's no harbor. It's just a ship, right? Instead of all the planks being slowly replaced over time, we're going to have almost kind of like 3 ships, because there's going to be the ship of Theseus that Theseus is commanding, the one that gets changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that original ship, all the planks are going to be kept. And another person, Stilpo, is going to put all those planks together exactly the same as they were on the first day the ship left the harbor. Okay?
Oh, okay.
Right. It's getting complicated now. So let me read a little bit from the book. Call Theseus' ship on the day he first took command of her the original ship. Call the ship in which Stilpo is now sailing the reconstructed ship. And call the ship in which Theseus is now sailing the continuous ship. I'm thinking about it, and to me at least, that's a pretty powerful argument for... Oh, I can't remember what the argument's for. It's just an interesting thought puzzle at this point.
For being called the ship of Theseus now.
Right. What is the actual ship of Theseus? And this is obviously to be applied to human persons, in case that wasn't readily apparent.
So the argument is now that the ship of Theseus is always a continuous ship.
Or is it?
Well, okay.
What's the real ship of Theseus? Is it the original ship, the reconstructed ship, or the continuous ship?
I'd say it's all 3.
You'd say the ship of Theseus could be all 3?
Yeah.
How? Elaborate. That seems a little bit disingenuous intellectually.
Actually, you know what? It's the ship of Theseus for 2. Yeah.
But 2? What do you mean?
For the continuous ship and the original ship.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the original ship and the continuous ship to you are the real ships of Theseus, yeah?
Yeah, but there's an argument that can be made for this third one.
The reconstructed ship?
Yeah.
Because the reconstructed ship is the exact same ship as when it first left the harbor. And the harbor isn't meant to be used in any point in this thought experiment. It's just I have to use it as a way of phrasing so you understand what I'm saying.
Right. There
is no actual harbor.
Right. But I feel like it is at the center of the argument a little bit.
The harbor?
Yeah.
That's so interesting because no one ever latches onto that when I give them the ship of Theseus experiment. It's always like...
It's the namesake.
Right. But it's only a namesake because the purpose of the argument isn't supposed to go to the harbor. It's supposed to go to the thoughts of personal identity and are you the same person? Because as I'm reading this, I can't remember what the statistic is, but I think it's the data, the thing, whatever. Every 7 years or so, right? Every cell in your body gets replaced, right?
Yeah.
So you're not, technically speaking, the same person you were.
But I am, though.
Even me, just saying that statement right then, I'm not the same person I was because I just made that statement and the atoms in me are changing and my thoughts are changing, right?
Yeah. This goes along with an argument that I had in Gateway to English Studies. But yeah, I'll talk about it in a second.
Tell me about it.
Oh, okay. Well, basically it was, we were talking about knowledge and saying whether knowledge that you learned is worth it, within regards to Frankenstein. they're talking about that, and they're like, why? There's all this regret that they have. And I'm like, well, here's the deal. You can't regret the knowledge that you have, because then you're not the same person that you were if you didn't have the knowledge in the first place, right? I mean, the hindsight is 20/20, but then you can't really say that the knowledge can't be learned in the first place because you already learned it. And then also, like, that just makes you who you are.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Now, because you are who you are, it then in turn... wait, what am I trying to say? So, like, the knowledge of having... Let me try to figure this out. Hold on, I keep on talking about the whatchamacallit. Because I got lost in the train of thought first.
Lost the train of thought? I do that all the time. It's fine.
Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the knowledge that I learn, or the knowledge that I continue to learn, is what makes me who I am. And so that identity is always changing. But then, because the identity is changing, it will always continue to be me because of the vessel that the knowledge is in.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay, and that's actually, I think that's kind of what the book talked about. You're almost saying word for word what Van Eugwen was talking about there for a moment.
Okay. Well, he didn't get lost in thought midway through.
Right. Yeah. So he calls it a psychological continuity criterion of personal identity, and I'm quoting right now.
Oh my goodness.
By this, they mean that a human organism that existed yesterday and a human organism that exists today can both be the same person, provided only that the memories and other mental properties of the latter have grown out of the mental properties of the former by the right sort of causal process. And they believe that the main task facing philosophers who think about the identity of the person across time is to give philosophically adequate description of what counts as the right sort of causal process. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
Sure, in so many words.
In so many words? Yeah, he tends to do that. With that in mind, and this is going to seem kind of like out of left field, but what do you think about the idea of a mind swap? Of like putting one person's thoughts, memories, all their mental processes into another being?
It's impossible.
You think it's impossible? You don't even entertain the concept?
I guess, yes.
Okay. Why?
Because this has to go with the identity that we find in God. So, like, he created us in his own image, and so he could have just created us to be, like, souls. He didn't have to create us as, like, people with bodies that have a soul contained within them. And so, if you kind of take the soul out of the body, I don't think that there is a way of putting it into another body to make it a different... Like, I think that our body is inherently connected to our soul.
Okay, that raises two questions. That was good. So, number one, and I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here, because this isn't exactly what I believe, but I want to challenge you. So, you say that God could have created us as just souls, right? And what you mean by that, would you mean some kind of wispy, ghosty form, or do you mean immaterial beings?
What's the difference between them?
One is made of something, the other is not.
Well, no, you said immaterial and the ghosty, wispy thingy.
Right, that's why, well, because normally when you think of a soul, or at least how it's presented in, culture and the like, you think of like that floating, wispy, kind of ghosty thingy, right?
Casper the Friendly Ghost kind of deal.
Kind of, yeah. Like Casper the Friendly Ghost. And so that's my first question before I follow up that question. Why do you think God could have made us into immaterial beings? Because to me, that doesn't make sense.
I think it's impossible. I think that there was like kind of a material being within having ghosts, but I guess like the soul, that's why I said like the soul and the body are kind of like one, and they can't be removed. And so like taking the soul out, it would be a material thing, but it wouldn't be placed in any vessel. And so putting it in a different vessel, I think, would make the identity of the person different.
Okay, so to be precise, would you then say that the soul is a material thing?
Yes.
The soul is some kind of material thing, we just can't measure it, is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Okay, All right.
But it needs to be connected to another material thing for it to be a thing.
Okay.
It's like kind of like a figurative language, or maybe like more of just like a concept.
Uh-huh.
Like think of the entity of love. I mean, I don't want to go that big, but there's that, and then you can attach all these things to it, but it's not really within. Like we have love within us, and then that's what makes it manifest into different things. But it's not really something that we can.
It's an immaterial thing. It's more of a concept.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Like the soul is like that kind of where it's like it's material, where you can it's there, but you really can't grab onto it.
Hmm. Okay. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that does let me follow into my second question, which is,
Okay.
you do believe in a soul then? That people have souls?
Mm-hmm.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah. It's
Of course, you kind of
I think
take
it's called nephesh.
the nefesh. Yeah, no, I know all about the nefesh. That's why I'm concerned,
Okay.
because I'm a bit more of a physicalist, because I heard a really freaking good argument, and it was like, wow. And it was, I want to say, Princess of Bohemia. So this Rene Descartes, famous philosopher and one of the fathers of substance dualism, was basically talking to this lady,
Mm-hmm.
and he was explaining, substance dualism, how, hey, we're one part human and there's a soul within us, and wow, look at all the problems this solves if it worked. And she's like, yeah, that's pretty smart, Descartes. I'll give you that. But I have a big boy question for you. How can something that is immaterial interact with something that is material? And Descartes, of course, couldn't answer this question because it's a logical paradox. It can't, right? And so he basically called her stupid and went about his business. So
Right.
when I think about a soul, I don't necessarily not believe in it, but it's more of like I've seen no instances of it. And I have perfect instances of my body and physical things all around me. So why would I be predisposed to believe in something that I can't see or
Mm-hmm.
touch, and cannot touch me for that matter? Because you get around this by saying, oh yeah, the soul is a material thing. But again, it's like, well, if you're claiming it's a material thing, how does that work? Haha!
You trapped me.
That was actually my intention.
I think it's like a material thing enough to say that it's like a thing within us, but the thing is we actually can't grab onto it. So
So is it just occupying the same space as us? Like, how does that work? Is it like occasionalism where,
I think it's a linked.
so you're going to go with the occasionalism route. Okay, that's the idea that from the beginning of time, right? We have our bodies. God knows everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have our bodies and we have our souls, and they're two different things, but they're connected. And so what God does is that He links up with whatever. He links up everything our body does with what our soul feels and what our soul wants, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say you're walking and you step on a Lego, right? And your body
Right.
feels pain, but how would your soul, your innermost, thoughts and feelings feel pain, right? Because they're not connected physically, as far as we know. You're not connected physically. How is that possible? So the idea of occasionalism is that when you step on that Lego, God has perfectly ordained at that moment for your soul to feel pain because you stepped on that Lego, or at least because your physical body stepped on that Lego, right? So would you go more along that route?
Um.
It's a tough position to defend, mind you, because you're basically just slamming down on the mystery button as hard as you can.
Well, I'd rather. I know that sounds weird, but I'd rather be okay with the mystery of not knowing this kind of stuff.
Right?
And I hate that that's kind of like a cop out with
It
that.
is, but you recognize it, and that's what makes it okay.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, well, that gets into a little bit, not really, but like Calvinist
Yeah,
ish.
it's along Calvinist lines.
Yeah, so it's like it's preordained that you step on this Lego, and that is what in turn helps you witness to a million people or whatever,
Right.
like that kind of deal. But then I believe more on the other side where it's like free will, and then God has like kind of a blueprint.
It was Elizabeth, Princess of Bohemia, by the way. for the lady Descartes was arguing with. Sorry.
Okay. That's all right.
Just wanted to make sure that she got her name out there.
Thanks, Bohemia. But that's kind of how I feel about it. And the thing is, like, that does make it more complicated because there's not really an answer to it for me.
Right.
And I'm okay with that.
That's fine.
But I mean, I'm willing to entertain the questions that come up.
Mm-hmm.
Because it then gets us further into trying to find out truths for ourselves, or at least truths for some other person. It kind of has to do with, like, poetry in a little bit, because, like, I think poetry asks unanswerable questions, and then that in turn helps us try to find unquestionable answers.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we'll never really find unquestionable answers, but we can make inferences into it, or make assumptions about what could be an unquestionable answer, but we really don't know for sure.
With that in mind, I gotta ask, have you thought a lot about free will?
Honestly, not too much. I've only been thinking about it. It's like kind of, I don't know, a new thing to me.
What do you mean?
I've just
free
kind of
will?
been going,
That's a new thing?
I mean, yeah. I mean, like, a new concept that I've been getting into. Because I haven't really thought about it before.
Why not?
Before this year.
You just don't worry about it?
I just been kind of... Yeah, because if I start worrying about it, I'm going to get to that cycle of not taking care of myself because it hurts my head too much.
I feel that.
Or makes me gag too much.
Mm-hmm.
Gag in the mind.
Gag in the mind. Well, I was thinking... I used to think a lot about free will, honestly. It was probably when I first took my intro to philosophy class. Mm-hmm. And actually, no, it goes further back than that. I thought about free will a lot all the way to my intro class for Block 4. Because Chris and Mihu...
Is that, Professor Mihu, he talks about free will. That's actually where I started thinking about free will, is when I was in his Exploring the Christian Faith class.
Ah, really? Neat. So basically, I read this book about this actually, it wasn't his book, but it was, I think it's called 4 Views of Divine Providence, right? And it was just like quick and dirty, 60 pages. Each of these guys gets to talk a little bit about how they view free will. And one of the guys in there, William Lane Craig, really stuck with me because he had this like really fantastic argument, I think at least, for free will. And it went something like this. So there's 100 possible worlds, okay? Worlds that could happen from this act.
Multiverse.
No, not even multiverse. It's just possible worlds, right? You don't have to even entertain a multiverse with this argument. At least I don't.
Oh, are we talking about a butterfly effect again?
Kind of like a butterfly effect. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so there's 100 possible worlds. And from those possible worlds, let's say there's only 50 actual worlds that could actually happen, right? Mm. Based on all the circumstances and possibilities and the like. And so from those possible worlds, there's an interesting interaction that takes place between God and man, in that man's choices can limit those number of possible worlds down to, let's say, about 10. So you get to choose, and your choices can limit those possible worlds to 10 actual worlds that can, actually happen.
Cool.
And then by the hand of providence, God can pick from one of those 10 worlds. And to use a real example of that would be something else that got shared, and I think in my Intro to Philosophy class, that I really enjoyed as an example. And listen, there's this guy called Tom, right? And he wants to go climb a mountain. But he promised his wife that he's going to go swimming with her, right? And so Tom is he's driving up to the mountain, mm-hmm. right? And if he's left to his own devices, he's going to climb the mountain. Right?
Sure.
But if his wife calls, he will honor his promise to his wife and then go swimming with her, right? And both of those get to be Tom's completely free will choice. But in the eyes of divine providence, there's wiggle room for if, the reception's good enough, or, all these thousands of probabilities that can possibly be subtly turned and twisted and adjusted to make a real world possible, so that
right.
God can either let Tom go to the mountain, his own choice to go to the mountain and climb the mountain, Or, by chance, his wife could call, because that is what God so desires, and then he'll go swimming. But in either case, it's by the unseen hand, as it were. Tom's choice is still free. So I thought that was a really neat argument, and I was wondering what you thought about it, because I need someone else to bounce that off to.
That's interesting, but let me just tell you that about this image that just popped in my head for the hand.
Go for it.
Do you remember? Have you played Super Smash Brothers?
Yes, all the time.
So the melee, the hand at the end of the game, was what came into my head when you said divine.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same.
I know that was super unrelated and not.
No, it was perfectly related.
But yeah, I think we have these choices, and I don't. The thing is, yeah, when it comes up to chance like that, I mean, I think it is the will of God kind of imposing in our lives, but then that kind of goes against free will in a way, but not really, because if we are to trust God like that, I think that there are certain things that He will create by chance, not really by chance, but like more of like the divine providence, like you say.
Right.
That will kind of like make our decisions for us. And I think that...
How so?
I guess like maybe him praying about it would be a way of having the divine providence in his life.
Elaborate on that. I don't quite understand.
Well, I guess like asking for God's guidance within this scenario on which one he should do would then influence the way that the things are going to work out. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Because I think that...
Just an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I don't... It's kind of weird, but like I think that if he let God enter the situation...
The scenario?
Yeah, the scenario, that there would be another force at work. Because if you take God out of the equation, which you should never do, but anyways, if you take God out of the equation, it's like Tom can do whatever the heck he wants. And if he sets his mind on one thing, it's probably going to get done. And so there are little micro things that do influence that decision. But then ultimately it can be up to God because he can put his trust into that and then make the decision. Right? And it leads to more, I guess, character building for Tom. Because honestly, I think that either way he could benefit from it.
Okay. So let me see if I understand this. So are you trying to say and make the argument that you have more free will if you go along with the choice God is making for you? Because that's kind of what I understood from what you were saying.
No.
No?
No.
No.
It narrows down the possibilities, like you were saying before, if you trust God to kind of help you make the decision. Because I think that we can make all these decisions on our own and not really follow the plan or blueprint that God has planned or that God has ordained for us, and so then we kind of make our own decisions and kind of fail or.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that relates to. Maybe I'm just stupid. To your free will decisions, how trusting or not trusting, how God has anything to do with it either way. I mean, of course, God has something to do with it on his end of the equation, because by those tiny little chances and possibilities and probabilities, Tom can be influenced whether to go ahead and climb the mountain as he intended, or keep the promise to his wife as he also intended, based on whether or not that call theoretically gets through to him, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, how does Tom having any relationship with God in any way correlate to his decision in this scenario?
It correlates because it's then pushing him in a certain way.
But how does he know that? Unless God outright says, hey, Tom, you should go swim with your wife instead, right?
Oh, he doesn't know.
No, he doesn't know.
What's going on? Yeah, no, I mean, I don't say that he is.
That's where my confusion lies.
Like God is. So, there is an influence of God in our lives. I think that there's, without a doubt, that is what is happening if we have God, or if we accept Christ in our hearts, that we have like the Holy Spirit kind of guiding us, right? You would disagree?
Disagree. And
okay.
Here's the point of my disagreement, is that I don't think whether or not you believe in God has any effect on whether God is influencing your life or not. You could not believe in God and God could be influencing your life. You could believe in God and God could be influencing your life. The only question is whether or not you are aware of it. in my opinion.
That's where I disagree with it.
Right. But you see, if you accept the proposition that God has a plan for everyone, right? And everyone is a part of his plan, right? Okay, if you accept those two propositions, I don't see how you could disaccept the proposition that whether you like it or not, you're a part of the plan. And a part of that plan means that you are going to be affected and have an effect on his plan, whether or not you believe in him or not. So the only question then becomes, are you aware of the effect that he and his plan are having on you by believing that he exists?
Why must you be aware?
You don't have to be aware. I'm saying it doesn't matter whether you know or not, at least from God's perspective. God's still going to get what he wants. You might not do exactly what he wants you to do, but he's still going to, in the larger scheme of things, use you to get exactly what he wants.
Well, that goes against free will, right?
I don't see how. It might, but I don't. Let me think about that for a second.
Because then that's saying that he's forcing us to do things based on his will.
Well, force is a strong word.
Okay.
What does it mean to force someone to do something?
Or I guess like making
When I think of forcing someone to do something, yeah, exactly. He's not making us do it. We just do it by chance. And we go back to like that Tom scenario, right? He is doing everything he wants to do in this scenario. There's no force being involved.
But there are...
In any scenario, either scenario, he's doing what he wants to do. He just doesn't know it.
I think there are like little tiny things that are pushing him in two different directions that I think God is doing in his life.
So you think that the flapping of a butterfly's wings means that free will can't exist?
Uh-huh. That was such a non sequitur.
That was kind of abstract. Sorry. No, it's not a non sequitur. Okay, let me explain. Okay?
Okay.
So, the butterfly, and let me make this absurd as possible, okay? So, the butterfly flaps its wings. Tom looks over to the right. Tom sees the butterfly flap its wings as he's driving toward the mountain. Wings? He thinks of how beautiful the butterfly is. What's beautiful? His wife is beautiful. Wait, he has a beautiful wife. Huh? Wait, I have a beautiful wife I made a promise to swim to. Oh crap, I should probably turn around and go swim with my wife.
She's ugly to me.
So, in that way, the flapping of a butterfly's wings means free will can exist because God made that butterfly float there at that exact moment for Tom to see it so that Tom would remember beautiful things, and then he'd remember his beautiful wife, and then he'd remember that he had a promise to his beautiful wife to go swimming, and then he turns around instead of going to the mountain and goes to swim with his beautiful wife.
But isn't that a choice of his own?
Exactly. And now you understand why I am confused as to what you're saying in that God is forcing his will on someone.
Well, I guess forcing would be my way of like trying to see your thing, which I now get what you were trying to say, which is what I was trying to say. Is that I think that you're like what I heard was more of like God makes decisions for us. Like we are just kind of like Ken and Barbie dolls.
No. We got options.
So that's what I thought you were saying.
Not unlimited options, but we got options.
That's what I thought you were saying.
Although I do think some people don't got options. But that's an entirely different discussion.
Okay. All right.
It's like, because I thought about this quite a lot, and the only thing I can think of is that, yeah, there must be some and there must be others, right? Because in the Bible, it talks, or not it, but Paul, I think. Paul specifically. He talks about the elect, right? People who are destined to be saved, right? They're good. They're Gucci. God's like, no, you're coming with me. You don't really have a choice in the matter. I'm going to set up circumstances in such a way where every possible option leads to your salvation. Sorry, right? And then there's another group of people, the damned, who are in every single possible world, choose and only have options that lead to their damnation. Sorry, you're just screwed. Every option I've laid out for you always leads to you being damned. That's the breaks, right? And so my idea is that there are those two groups, but there's actually a third group, a group of people that are up for grabs. Like they have the options of being saved or not being saved, right? But what makes all of this so darn complicated is that you can't tell what group anyone is in, except for if they are saved, right? Because if they're saved, you're saved, right? If you're saved, you're saved. It's that simple. Then therefore you must be a member. You could theoretically be a member of the elect, or a member of, the group of people that have a choice in the matter, right? But you'd never know because there's no way to tell. So that's just my personal philosophy on that. I have nothing really to back that up. That's just my own thoughts, which leads to its own set of horrible, terrible metaphysical paradoxes and problems.
Yeah.
So
I'd agree with that.
But that's just me. But back to the butterfly.
Okay.
After that long train of thoughts that have very little to do with what we were talking about. Yeah, I don't see how it infringes on free will at all, or how God has anything to do in the equation when considering if God is affecting your life, whether you believe in him or not. The only question, I think, is if you're aware of it, and if he might possibly change what he does based on your belief or not.
No, I get what you're saying.
So,
I get what you're saying now.
You just disagree, which is fine.
You're kind of winning me over to your side a little bit.
Oh,
it's making sense
I like
in my
hearing
head.
That.
The thing is, like, I kind of like, I just disagree with things until I can understand them. And it's a really bad way of going. I think that's what I was doing there.
It's called being a skeptic. It's a good viewpoint.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just don't want to be like yes and amen to everything that someone says about theology. I think your theology would be kind of messed up if that happened.
Oh yeah, bigly.
You'd be like, I'll be like, what? I don't know. I don't want to go into hypotheticals because we'll go for days. But actually, I think this has to do with the poem that I wanted to talk about. All right. The unexpected. The unexpected is unexpected, yet expected in expected ways. Expected only when we least expect it. The unexpected is true to be feared, as we traffungle through life, trepidatiously treading, tangentially taken by the unexpected expected. Expecting that we expect the unexpected at every turn and junction, we need not fear the unexpected because we expect it. Expect then the expected because the unexpected is.
Ooh, you know what? I'd probably need to be an English major to be able to make quick sense of that.
Yeah, you have to kind of read it
because
slow.
It makes sense, but there's a lot of funny placement of verbs and the like that make it like, ooh, hold on, I need to, if it's expected and not expected, and then,
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah,
I think it has to do with this because honestly, I think that the unexpected can be. I don't want to be like kind of say this is truth, but like kind of the unexpected is God working through our lives, kind of deal, and we can always try to.
I can understand that.
Like we can always try to expect that, but it's really not gonna. It's not gonna be unexpected because we expect it, and so we just have to deal with the unexpected being what it is. Unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And I guess like it has to do with fear too and anxiety. So that's what I
bigly.
In the middle two stanzas, that's where I talk about it, where I'm like, we need the fear. It needs to be feared, but then also at the same time, if we did fear it, then nothing's gonna get done.
Right. No, I get that because at least for me, a lot, especially last semester during a Drowsy Chaperone.
Mm-hmm. Was it last semester?
I was, what?
Oh, it was. Right? No.
Yeah,
it was 2 semesters ago. That was 2 semesters ago.
Yeah. Well, okay, 2 semesters ago. When I say semester, I mean like the whole year.
Okay.
It all goes together in my head.
Okay.
I'm terrible at time, direction. If I was lost in the wilderness, I would definitely die.
Okay.
I had no hope.
Oh. That's helpful.
Okay. So as I was saying, back during Drowsy 2 semesters ago,
yeah.
I knew that I was really looking for the unexpected, as it were, right? And I noticed that I'd see, or at least I seem to see, lots of patterns in my life, right? Whether it be when I'm outside walking,
the pattern is the pattern.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait,
right?
I'll get to that later. Just remind me. Anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. And I'd be looking for a lot of these patterns, and at least for me, I can understand where the anxiety of trying to look for these patterns can find, because I'm looking for a pattern. I'm trying to divine some kind of sequence almost, like, okay, this happened and then this happened, and then if this happens and this happens, then this is possible to happen, and this happens and this happens, right?
Yeah, but you're not going to find it if you're looking for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I noticed the most peculiar things happened when I was like, okay, I'm on this pattern. I'm so sure that this is what's about to happen because this sequence and this sequence. And then when it finally is supposed to happen, that doesn't happen. But then something else happens that was totally not a part of the sequence, right?
Yep.
I'm like, wait, what just happened?
But then
that was kind of unexpected.
But then that unexpected pattern that comes out of what you thought was an expected pattern is actually a pattern within itself.
Yep.
I don't mean to be like kind of existential there, but you understand what I'm saying, right?
A pattern inside a pattern inside a pattern, right?
Is an enigma.
Yeah, wrapped inside of a taco.
Yeah, in a burrito.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You understand.
But yeah, so that kind of goes into what I was trying to say earlier, but I wanted you to say your piece because I liked it. But the pattern is from this TV show that I watched. That it's called Maniac.
Maniac?
Yeah, it has Jonah Hill and Emma Stone. They're great. Anyways.
Oh, I remember. Yeah, you and Chloe watched that during what was it?
It was.
Was it during Drowsy?
I think it was in between Three Sisters. Well, she wasn't here during Drowsy.
Yeah.
So it was in between.
Right.
It was between Three Sisters and Sense and Sensibility. I watched it with her and
Didn't
Ethan.
get to see Adolfo.
Yeah.
Sad.
or Robert Martin.
The bridegroom here to marry Janet.
Anyways.
You didn't get to see Cold Feet.
Yeah, Cold Feet. Anyways, the pattern is the pattern. Okay. Sorry, I have to get this out or I'm going to forget it. The pattern is kind of what he was going through, where he was driving himself crazy because he was trying to find this pattern that really didn't exist, but then ultimately existed if he didn't think about it. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So I don't want to.
Pattern avoids your perception.
Yeah, and then instead of like letting the universe be, he was trying to control it, and it wasn't working for him.
Yeah.
And then everyone was like, "You're not compos mentis," which is of sound mind kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah, so he was like, I'm totally compos mentis, totally compos mentis, and the thing is like he was trying to impose his destiny upon the world kind of deal instead of trying to make his own destiny, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you try to make patterns or try to enforce patterns onto the world, you're not going to find them, or they're not going to be to your liking, because then that gets into finding anxiety and things like that, where you're like, this should have happened this way, and then when it doesn't happen that way, you're just ultimately let down.
Yeah.
And so like I've actually found myself in a pattern of that too. But like where I find myself wanting this to happen, and then once I am let down ultimately, I can't reconcile it in my head.
Yeah. No, I completely understand that.
Yeah. But I totally recommend that TV show. It's great. Yeah.
Along with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and all that.
Oh yeah. I mean, a
From our last conversation.
A depressed android is probably one of the best characters anyone can come up with, I think. There's just so many possibilities.
Yeah. No, I don't quite want to let go of the pattern discussion quite yet, because I really think about that a lot, about patterns and patterns and patterns, and I wonder how much of my feelings, how much I'd feel of the sad feelings that I have now wouldn't be there if I wasn't such a pattern seeker. Because what happens is that I see events, right?
Mm-hmm.
And hold on to that thought. I see events, and I suppose what can come out of those events. And when I avoid those events, because as I said in our last conversation, right? Mm-hmm. I'm very good at analyzing something and then choosing not to do it because I think of all the negative outcomes that could have spawned from it, right? Mm-hmm. That's currently what I'm working on, really, is doing something even though I can see all the negatives, right? And usually I'm happily surprised at, oh, wow, this actually didn't go nearly as terrible as I thought it would go.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah. Within these patterns, like it sets up it just sets us up for failure. And where what we were saying earlier, like in our last conversation, where we as humans inherently want to find patterns because it's a shortcut.
Yeah.
Into, our brain's like, okay, well, this is the easy way out, but maybe the easy way out is making it worse for you in the end. And so, like, these patterns might be playing tricks on our minds. And it's also Well, the thing is, I brought up that song, "My Mind's Playing Tricks on Me" by the Ghetto Boys, which is also a great song. But that song finds itself in a TV show that I was talking about, which is funny because it actually
Maniac.
Yeah, it has to do with that. It's like his mind's playing tricks on him because he wants to find the pattern so much, and because he wants to impose that pattern on the universe when the universe is like, no thanks, that's not how we work here. Like we have our own patterns. Maybe you saw that pattern on before, but not that pattern now. You know what I'm saying? What do you think about it?
This kind of links me almost all the way back to what we were originally talking about with personal identity in the Ship of Theseus, because when I think about patterns and I think about, looking into something and saying, okay, this is because of this is because of this is because so forth, so on ad infinitum, I generally tend to think about change. That's it.
Change.
Okay, good. The only thing constant is change. And when I think about patterns, and I think about personal identity, those two things really stick out to me in context of change, because whenever I try to find the pattern changes. But it changes in such a way that one might say that the pattern changes in such a way that, at least in my opinion, it simultaneously becomes imperceivable, but it remains on the same course it was before, which doesn't really make sense because, well, I guess it could make sense.
Well, no,
but
here,
it's a bit more.
Here, I got something for you. Well,
okay.
The thing is, from the beginning, right, I don't think the Ship of Theseus was meant to be the same. So I think it was on a course of change from its onset. Before it even got out of the harbor, it was like, okay, well, this ship, if it comes back to this harbor any differently, it's going to have changed a little bit. Like the water's going to erode whatever parts of the boat.
Atoms will move.
Yeah, it's like,
for lack of a better. Go straight to the extreme.
Well, yeah.
Atoms.
Well, yeah, it's like I was talking about this in my gateway class. Or I guess like after my gateway class, I had a really big discussion with Claire Prince. Shout out to her. But like I had a epiphany where it's like my identity, right? It's shaped like maybe there's like a bunch of atoms, right? There's tons of atoms, more than tons, but you know what I'm saying. Like there's like all this knowledge out there. Just think of the atoms as knowledge, right? Or just something that affects me, right? I have this core identity that I just roll with me here because identity is kind of weird, but I have this core identity that's who I am, like where my soul is linked to my body or whatever. So this core identity that's kind of pushing through this knowledge of just existing, because you always learn something each day, or you don't learn something each day, which kind of like changes who you are. But you're pushing it against, you're kind of like friction against these other atoms, and so it's like it's continually changing who you are. Like different things are coming off of you, and different things are being added on
constantly.
Yeah, and so I think that like even though there is change to everything else, I think there is within me a core identity that I can hold on to. And that kind of goes against some of the things that we were saying. But I don't know. I think that the identity here is like who we are or whose we are that we try to get into this discussion. Because we talked about God, where it's like we find our identity in God, but we also find our identity in other things. So like if we find our identity in one thing and then in the next moment we don't find our identity in that, it's just kind of like flopping atoms, like we're taking on those atoms and then we're taking these atoms off kind of deal. I don't know. You understand what I'm trying to say?
No, I get exactly what you're trying to say, and this is what I'm going to counter you with. And again, playing devil's advocate, this isn't exactly what I think.
Yeah.
But do you think the idea of personal identity is inherently flawed because of that? Because at any given moment, we are changing.
Yeah.
And that the idea of personal identity, if we assume that it's all, in our heads, as it were, is completely subject to physical change.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I am not the same person making this statement right now than I am the person making this statement right now. Those are two separate identities, because I just lost however many million atoms at that moment I said that statement, and gained however many million atoms I just gained from this statement.
Yeah. I think we are different people with every single passing moment, but the thing is, I think that there is a core identity that we can latch on to.
Okay.
But there are extenuating circumstances. I'm not saying that, because like there are like
you could have like head trauma and forget everything. You know what I'm saying? And it's unfortunate, but like that's kind of the reality of that too. Is that like I think that's why your soul and your body are linked, kind of deal. If like something happens to your body, then something happens to your soul, kind of deal.
Okay, so you're starting to jump on the occasionalism shit.
Yeah, yeah.
I respect that to a point.
The occasional ship of Theseus.
Yeah. The occasional ship of Theseus. You're occasionally on the ship of Theseus.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I want to latch on to something you said there for a second, where you said disregarding accounts of head trauma and the like.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a little bit confused as to where you think we're getting our identity from, because you mentioned the soul and then you mentioned the brain, right? Yeah. And what it sounds like to me is that you're kind of saying we are our thoughts, right? Or our memories or our experiences or what have you, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that forms part of it. I'm not saying that's all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So could you explain that a little bit? Because to me, those are two very different things. The idea of a soul and the idea of a physical mind.
Mm-hmm. I think they are different, yes. I guess you're trapping me again. I know you are, and I hate it. But I think that
I haven't said anything. I'm just asking you questions.
I know these are trapping questions. I think that. Sorry, could you repeat the question? I got distracted.
Okay. No, it's okay. I distracted you.
Yeah.
So, my question is, you said something about brain damage changing a person, but then you also talked about the soul.
Yes. Okay, so now I got it. Okay. So
okay,
I
we're
think
back.
Okay, you're gonna disagree with this,
Fine,
and you're totally gonna play devil's advocate, and I know I'm not a philosophy guy or whatever.
Neither am I.
But
so.
I think that we have a soul identity.
Okay.
Soul and soul. You know what I'm saying? SOLE and SOUL. And I think that those are linked. I don't want to say linked, but I think they're the same.
We have a soul identity.
Yeah. And then that is ultimately like kind of morphed, but also just continually that thing. But then it's kind of changed a little bit or formed into something based on every single atom that we're running into. Does that make sense?
Are you supposing then that we are not one substance? We are not two substances, but we might be three substances. Because what you're telling me right now is that you have your body, right? And you have your mind, which is both are completely affected by causal relations of atoms moving, thoughts, experiences, what have you. Mm-hmm. But then there's a third thing, which it is not necessarily a material thing. It could be like an immaterial concept of like a soul identity, which is like, would you say that's like the best possible version of you that exists? I'm not quite following there.
I think it's the core of it all. And I think that the mind and the body are influenced by it a little bit. And then it goes both ways, but also the soul is what is the core thing to begin with. You'll have outer things like stepping on Legos, or you'll have this certain thought that might make you form your identity a little bit different, but also there's also that core identity that can never be changed. And I think that's who you are. And so that's why we go into the whole discussion of can my kind of like, because like if you take the mind out of someone, right, I think that there's still a soul, right? Like you take the mind and body out of a thing, but there's still a soul. But I think
that's why you're so vehemently opposed to the idea of mind swap.
Yeah, I think that you can't,
because that would be a big hole in your argument.
Yeah, the mind, taking the mind out.
If you could swap brains with people.
Yeah, taking the mind out, because I say that I go with the occasional thing.
Not brains, but like consciousness.
Yeah. The consciousness, because I think that there's something beyond that forms who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I can't come up with any like evidence to say that that's true or false or anything like that, but that's what I believe.
It's just a supposition.
Yeah.
Which makes me want to challenge your supposition with another supposition. That that if they're both suppositions, right? My supposition would be then why can't we just swap consciousnesses with another person's body? Or, on top of that, why is there only one soul to a body? Why does there only have to be one soul to every body? Why couldn't there be 100 souls to every body?
That's when we get
or 2 souls to every body.
into possession of soul kind of deal.
Right. How does that make sense? Because I see no reason why that couldn't be the case. If the soul is an immaterial, or not immaterial, because you want to say it's a material thing, right?
Because it's linked to material things, if that makes sense.
Right, because an immaterial thing, by definition, cannot exist. But that opens up a whole new slew of problems. So I'm just going to avoid that for a second.
Okay.
And just let that one slide. Okay. I'll just accept that, okay? How does that work, then? If there could be multiple souls, and why is it only one soul to every body, right?
Oh, you're asking me this question?
Yeah, I'm asking you this question. I'm legitimately curious what you think.
I don't think there's this kind of goes against like there's an argument for this, I think. Yeah, I've heard of this before. Yeah, the duality of man. I don't think that there is. And I don't really, I can't really back that up. But like the whole...
It just, intuitively you want to disagree.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, there's schizophrenia. Darn it, that kind of goes against what I'm trying to say. But
right.
More of just like, I don't think that there can be two. Like, I think there could be multiple personalities, but I don't think there could be two. Because I think that multiple personalities thing comes from the mind. It doesn't really come from the soul.
Right.
Like you could
so
think
then my
that
question
you're
would
two people,
be,
but I don't think that
then
you are
what
two
even
people.
is the soul?
Who we are. Our identity.
But you just brought up a great point to your own bereavement about the idea of schizophrenics having multiple personalities.
But that's in
Would
the
you
mind.
just say that they're but then what does the soul do if you are not your mind or your conscious? If your soul isn't your mind and it isn't your consciousness, it's just some abstract third thing that you have no connection with directly, apart from how God connects you through the occasionalistic whims of fate, right? Then what is it? How does it matter? It's a fair question.
It is. And that's why I said it's okay to not get into it.
That's probably a good point to stop on then.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm okay with not knowing.
Right.
But I mean, I know there's flaws to every single stupid argument that we can come up with, whether or not there's just one thing that we are, or there's multiple things that we are, or we can take things out of ourselves and still be ourselves. There's a lot of things, right? But the way I see it is that there's always going to be this core identity that we find ourselves having, regardless of the mind or body, but is also informed by the mind or body. This is a contradiction, by the way. This is called
I completely follow.
But it's going to be influenced by the outside, but also our inside influences the outside kind of deal. Because I think that, like I said before, the mind plays tricks on me. Like that, the thing is, like my mind plays tricks on me. That's what the song is saying. It's my mind plays tricks on me. So who is me, right?
Right.
I think that me is the soul, right? And then we also have the body that's kind of our physical presence that kind of connects that immaterial thing into existence.
Mm-hmm. So then, of course, my question again would be, what part of you, me, is the soul? What is it? But from what you're saying is that it's not your consciousness, because, or at least so it appears, because the mind can affect your consciousness. Now, whether that's by playing tricks on you in the case of someone who's schizophrenic or otherwise,
right,
I'll just let that slide. But what part of you, this soul, right, is occupying your body, your mind, right? And how much of you is your soul, your core identity, and how much of you is being affected or is in part affected by, or affecting your mind?
Yeah.
Right? Am I my thoughts but not my consciousness? Am I my consciousness but not my thoughts?
What?
Something like that.
I think you're going to hate my answer to this. But my
That's
answer is, I don't know.
That's a beautiful, beautiful answer. I love it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know either. So
Yeah.
it's not like I can lord anything over you.
Well, the thing is, like, we ask ourselves these questions. Is like, well, the thing is, well, we can't really say for sure whether or not one thing is right or not wrong.
Right.
Because everything is meaningless. No, I'm kidding. Well, I mean,
Don't go nihilistic on me.
Well, no. I mean, this kind of goes into Ecclesiastes, right? Where there are all these
Vapor.
Huh?
It's all vapor.
Yeah. It's all hevel.
Hevel. There we go. That's the word.
Meaningless.
I knew it was an H.
It's what meaningless in the NIV version, I think. But it's like these things that we have so many deep questions about, and we just really want to figure out. Honestly,
kind of don't matter.
It's smoke. We can't grab onto it. So the thing is, if we try to make sense of it, the more it becomes smoke, I think. The more of a mystery it is. Because I think with more knowledge comes less knowledge.
More questions?
Or less understanding, I think.
More questions, less understanding.
Yeah.
That's a bit of a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, like, the thing is, the more you know, I guess, like, the more you should know, right? But honestly, I think it's...
Is it Socrates who said that? Who said, the only thing I know is that I know nothing?
Yes. And I'm not saying
the only thing I know is that I know nothing.
I don't think that we know nothing. But I do think that
We're not quite as dumb as Socrates.
Huh? We know very little.
We're not...
We know very little.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I this is a cop-out for sure. But I don't know how I can reconcile what I believe, but I know I believe it, and I think that has to do with faith.
Right.
Yeah. And I know that it'll all be answered in some way with little nuggets of truth.
Got plenty of time for nuggets. We're still young.
Yeah.